March 14, 1957. Willie Thompson's hands were as steady as a doctor's as he moved the straight razor across Bumpy Johnson's throat. He had been cutting hair in Harlem for 40 years. For 40 years, he had kept people's secrets. But today, Willie had a secret that could get Bumpy Johnson killed. 3 men had just walked through the door. Willie had never seen these 3 men before. They were wearing long coats, even though it was spring. Willie knew, just like every man in Harlem knew, what those coats were hiding. The first man locked the front door. The second man pulled down the blinds. The third man stood right behind Bumpy's chair, his hand inside his coat, holding onto something cold and deadly. Bumpy sat there with his eyes closed, a hot towel on his face, not able to protect himself. The man behind him took out his gun, pressed it to the back of Bumpy's head, and pulled back the hammer. "Don't move, Willie," the man whispered. "Just keep cutting. This isn't about you." The room was quiet, 3 against 1. Bumpy didn't have a weapon. He was outnumbered, and he was trapped. Then Bumpy spoke. He said 3 words, as calm as a Sunday morning. "Closer, Willie." What happened in the next 47 seconds would become one of the most famous moments in Harlem's history. 3 gunmen walked into that barbershop, but when the smoke cleared and the sirens faded, only 1 man walked out alive, and it wasn't any of the 3 with guns. What nobody knew, what people still whisper about today, is that Bumpy Johnson knew those men were coming before they even got dressed that morning. To understand what happened in Willie Thompson's barbershop that afternoon, you need to know who Bumpy Johnson was in 1957 and why some men in New York decided he had to die. No matter what, by the spring of 1957, Bumpy Johnson had become something the Italian mob couldn't understand. He was a black man they couldn't control, couldn't bribe, and couldn't kill. He had been running Harlem's numbers game for over 20 years. The numbers game wasn't just gambling, it was hope. Every morning, black people from 110th to 155th Street would place their bets. A nickel here, a dime there, on 3 numbers that could change their week. Those nickels added up. By 1957, the numbers game in Harlem was making over $20 million a year. That was $20 million the Italian families wanted. But the numbers game was just the beginning. What made Bumpy Johnson really dangerous was something the mob couldn't understand. He was loved. When the city tried to close black-owned businesses on 125th Street, Bumpy made some phone calls. The trouble stopped. When families got eviction notices in the winter, Bumpy paid their rent. When young men got out of prison and couldn't find work, Bumpy gave them jobs. Not just tough jobs, but real jobs. He would walk them into barbershops, restaurants, and cleaners' businesses. He had helped Savan speak up for them himself. "This man paid his debt," Bumpy would say. "Now give him a chance to pay his bills." The Italian mob ruled by making people afraid. Bumpy ruled with something much stronger, respect. And real respect can't be bought or forced. By 1957, the Genovese family was tired of seeing their power stop at 110th Street. Vito Genovese himself had taken over after Lucky Luciano was sent away, and Vito was not a patient man. He thought Harlem should belong to him. $20 million a year was just sitting there, protected by 1 man. They had tried to take it by force twice. The first time, they sent for men to scare one of Bumpy's workers. All 4 ended up in the hospital that night. The second time, they tried to bribe a Harlem councilman to shut down Bumpy's business with city permits. 3 days later, that councilman found some photos on his desk, photos his wife would not like. The permits were approved by noon. Bumpy wasn't just a gangster. He was a planner who could see 3 steps ahead while his enemies were still deciding what to do. So the Genovese family tried something new. They would hire outsiders. Men with no connection to New York, men Bumpy's people wouldn't recognize. They found 3 brothers from Philadelphia, Sal, Marco, and Dominic Carbone. They were small-time tough guys trying to make a name for themselves. The kind of men who would do anything for money. The price was $30,000 split 3 ways, plus a piece of land in Brooklyn. Once the job was done, the target was Bumpy Johnson. Anytime, any place, anyway. Just make sure he was dead before the week was over. The Carbone brothers took 3 days to learn Bumpy's routine. They found out he ate breakfast at the same diner every morning. He did business at S'mores Paradise in the evenings. And they learned something else that made them happy. Every Thursday afternoon, without fail, Bumpy Johnson went to Willie Thompson's barbershop on 182nd Street. Same chair, same time. 2 hours of cutting, shaving, and talking. For 2 hours every Thursday, Bumpy was sitting still, easy to find, and easy to attack. Or so they thought. What the Carbones didn't know, what Vito Genovese didn't know, was that Bumpy Johnson had one rule that kept him alive for 25 years. Trust nobody completely, but know everybody. Absolutely. March 11th, 1957. Philadelphia. The meeting happened in the back room of a social club on South 9th Street. Vito Genovese didn't come himself. He never got his hands dirty. Instead, he sent his helper Tony Salerno to handle the deal. Sal Carbone was the oldest at 34. He did the talking. 3 men, 3 days, 1 target, Salerno explained, putting a photo of Bumpy on the table. This is Ellsworth Johnson. They call him Bumpy. Why Bumpy? Marco asked. He's got a bump on the back of his head. It happened when he was a kid. Don't let the name fool you. This man is the most dangerous person north of 96th Street. He has eyes everywhere. Cops, politicians, street sweepers. Everyone in Harlem owes him something. Then how do we get close? Dominic, the youngest at 26, leaned forward. Salerno smiled. That's why we hired you. Nobody in New York knows your faces. You're like ghosts. You get in, do the job, and disappear back to Philly. By the time anyone knows what happened, you're 300 miles away. He slid an envelope across the table. $15,000, half up front. The rest, when we see the body in the papers, Salerno said. Don't make me come looking for it. Sal opened the envelope and counted the money. His brothers watched. We've done jobs before, Sal said slowly, but this one feels different. What aren't you telling us? Salerno's jaw tightened. What I'm telling you is that better men have tried. Men who knew the streets, knew the people. All of them failed. Some of them disappeared. Others, well, let's just say they left New York with fewer fingers than they came with, and you think we can do what they couldn't. I think Bumpy Johnson has never seen your faces. I think he doesn't know you exist, and I think that's the only advantage anyone has ever had against him. Don't waste it. The brothers drove to New York the next morning. They rented a room in a cheap hotel on the Lower East Side, far from Harlem. For 3 days, they watched, took pictures, and made plans. By Wednesday night, they had their plan. The barbershop, Sal said, spreading a hand-drawn map on the motel bed. Thursday afternoon, he's in that chair for 2 hours. 1 door in the front, 1 in the back. We lock the front, cover the back. 3 guns on 1 man in a chair. He's got nowhere to go. What about witnesses? Dominic asked. The barber, Sal shrugged. The barber's nobody. He sees nothing. If he's smart, he'll keep cutting hair like nothing happened. If he's not, he made a gun with his fingers. Then there's 1 less witness. Marco pulled back the slide on his .45, checking the chamber. I've never killed a famous man before. By Thursday night, he won't be famous anymore, Sal replied. He'll just be dead. What none of them knew, what they couldn't possibly have known, was that by Wednesday night, Bumpy Johnson had already gotten 3 separate warnings about them. The cab driver who picked them up from Penn Station, the hotel clerk who gave them their room, the newspaper seller on the corner of 132nd Street who saw them watching the barbershop. Bumpy knew. He had known since Monday. Bumpy Johnson didn't survive 25 years in Harlem by fighting every threat that came his way. He survived by understanding something most men never learned. The most dangerous weapon isn't a gun, it's information. While the Carbone brothers were drawing their little map, Bumpy was in his office above Small's Paradise, listening to Jerome Patterson, the same cab driver who had picked the brothers up from Penn Station. 3 white boys, Jerome said, Italian accents. Talked about Philly the whole ride. Asked about the neighborhood. Asked about the barbershops. Bumpy nodded slowly. Barbershops. Yes, sir. One of them had a photograph. Tried to hide it, but I saw it in the mirror. Let me guess. My photograph. Jerome just nodded. Bumpy handed him $50. You never drove those men. You were off duty. Understand? After Jerome left, Bumpy sat in silence for almost an hour. He could have had those 3 boys killed that night. 1 phone call, 3 bodies in the East River by morning. The Genovese family would never even know what happened to their hired men. But Bumpy understood something deeper. If he killed these 3 quietly, Genovese would just send 3 more, then 3 more after that. The only way to end this was to send a message so loud, so clear, that no one would ever try again. The next morning, Bumpy visited Willie Thompson's barbershop, not for a haircut, just to talk. Willie had been cutting hair in Harlem since 1917. He had seen everything. He had survived everything. More importantly, he had served in the First World War, 364th Infantry Regiment, the Buffalo Soldiers. Willie Thompson was 62 years old, but his hands were still strong and his instincts were sharper than any of his razors. There's going to be some trouble tomorrow, Bumpy said quietly, sitting in his regular chair. 3 men, they're coming for me. Willie didn't stop sweeping. Police trouble or street trouble? Street. Italian money. Philadelphia soldiers. And what do you need from me? Bumpy looked at him in the mirror. I need you to trust me, Willie. When they walk in, you keep cutting. You keep calm. When I say closer, you hit the floor. Understand? Willie paused, looked at Bumpy's reflection. Mr. Johnson, I've cut your hair for 15 years. Never once did you give me a reason to doubt you. And tomorrow won't be the first time. That night Bumpy made his preparations. He had 2 of his men stand across the street, not to step in, but to watch, to see what happened. He had another man in the apartment above the barber shop, and under the barber's chair held in place by 2 strips of electrical tape. Bumpy put a small .32 caliber gun. The trap was set. Bumpy Johnson wasn't walking into an ambush. He was making one. Thursday morning, Bumpy ate breakfast at his usual diner. He made his usual rounds. He arrived at Willie's barbershop at 2:30 p.m., just like he had every Thursday for 15 years. Willie put the cape over his shoulders, covered his face with warm shaving cream, and began the slow, careful work of running a straight razor along Bumpy's jaw. At 2:42 p.m., the front door opened. 3 men walked in long coats, cold eyes. The first one locked the door behind them. March 14, 1957, 2:47 p.m., the barbershop became silent. 2 other customers, a school teacher and a postal worker, sat frozen in their chairs. Sal Carbone stood by the door. Marco moved to cover the back exit. Dominic, the youngest and most eager, walked right behind Bumpy's chair. Willie's razor paused against Bumpy's cheek. His eyes met Bumpy's in the mirror. Bumpy gave a tiny nod. Keep cutting. Dominic reached into his coat, took out the .45, and pressed the barrel to the back of Bumpy's head. Don't move, Willie, he whispered. Just keep cutting. This isn't about you. The room was silent, except for the ticking clock on the wall. The school teacher was shaking. The postal worker had closed his eyes. Sal stepped forward. Mr. Johnson, you know why we're here. Bumpy's eyes stayed closed. The hot towel still covered half his face. I've been waiting for you since Monday. Sal's confidence faded. What? The cab from Penn Station, the hotel on Delancey, the newspaper stand on the corner. Bumpy's voice was quiet, calm as still water. You think you can move through my neighborhood without me knowing? Dominic pressed the gun harder. Doesn't matter what you know, you're still going to die. Bumpy opened his eyes, looked at Dominic in the mirror. Son, I've had guns pointed at me by better men than you. They're all in the ground. You want to join them? Pull that trigger. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Bumpy spoke again. 3 words. Calm as Sunday morning. Closer, Willie. Willie dropped to the floor. The towel fell from Bumpy's face. In one quick move, faster than any of the Carbones could react, Bumpy's hand shot under the chair, grabbed the .32 from its tape, and fired. The first shot hit Dominic in the chest. He stumbled backward, his gun falling to the floor. Marco raised his weapon. Bumpy was already spinning in the chair, firing again. The bullet hit Marco in the shoulder, sending him crashing through the back door into the alley. Sal, frozen by the door, finally pulled out his gun, but before he could aim, the front window exploded inward. Bumpy's men from across the street had shotguns. The message was clear. Sal dropped his weapon and raised his hands. The whole thing had taken 47 seconds. Bumpy stood up slowly, took off the barber's cape, and walked calmly toward Sal, who was shaking so badly he could barely stand. I want you to understand something, Bumpy said, his voice barely above a whisper. I could have killed you Monday. I could have killed you Tuesday. I let you live long enough to walk through that door so you could see this moment. He leaned closer, close enough that Sal could smell the shaving cream. Go back to Philadelphia. Go back to Vito Jet. Tell him what happened here today. Tell him I knew about his plan before his men left the train station. Tell him I let them come to me. Tell him I was never the one who was trapped. Bumpy paused, looking straight into Sal's scared eyes. You tell him I said Harlem bleeds for no one. Sal was crying now, really crying, tears running down his face, and Bumpy's voice got even quieter. If anyone from the Genovese family comes into my neighborhood again, I won't give a warning. I won't send a message. I'll just send bodies. Do we understand each other? Sal nodded. He couldn't speak. Then what? Don't run. Walking shows respect. Running shows guilt. And right now, the only thing keeping you alive is my respect for the code. Sal walked out the front door, his legs barely holding him up. Dominic Carbone died on the barbershop floor. Marco Carbone bled out in the alley before the ambulance arrived. Sal Carbone took a train back to Philadelphia that night and never came back to New York. Willie Thompson swept up the broken glass, cleaned his chair, and opened for business the next morning. Word spread through the underworld like wildfire. By nightfall, every hustler from Baltimore to Boston had heard the story. 3 gunmen walked into Bumpy Johnson's barbershop. Only the barber walked out alive, and he cleaned up the mess like it was just another day. The Genovese family called an emergency meeting the next week. Vito himself was quiet for most of it. When he finally spoke, his voice was tired. This man knew. He knew before our people left Philadelphia. He knew when they arrived. He knew every step they took, and he let them walk into that barbershop anyway. He shook his head. What are we supposed to do with a man like that? Tony Salerno had no answer. We leave Harlem alone, Vito finally said. There's money everywhere in this city. We focus on the Bronx, Queens, the waterfront, but Harlem belongs to Bumpy Johnson. It always did. It was the second time in 10 years that the Italian mob had backed down from a fight over land without getting anything in return. As for Sal Carbone, he went back to Philadelphia, a broken man. He quit the criminal life, opened a hardware store in South Jersey, and lived quietly for another 30 years. The story goes that whenever someone mentioned Bumpy Johnson's name, Sal would leave the room without saying a word. Willie Thompson kept cutting hair until 1972. Every Thursday, Bumpy sat in that same chair in that same spot until the day he died. And above Willie's mirror, in small letters that most customers never noticed, were 5 words that Bumpy had told him to put there after that day. Harlem bleeds for no one. The story of the barbershop isn't just about violence, it's about vision. Bumpy Johnson understood something that most men never learn in their whole lives. True power isn't about what you can do to your enemies. It's about what your enemies believe you can do. It's about being 3 steps ahead. It's about turning their ambush into your message. 3 gunmen walked into that barbershop thinking they had the advantage. They had the numbers. They had the guns. They had the surprise. But Bumpy had something they couldn't see coming. He let them come. If this story got you excited, hit that subscribe button. We're sharing these Bumpy Johnson stories every week, and trust me, they only get crazier. Drop a like if you understand why the barber was the only one who walked out, and let me know in the comments, would you have let Sal live to carry the message? Next time we're telling the story of how Bumpy Johnson walked unarmed into a room with Lucky Luciano and walked out with control of Harlem. You don't want to miss that. Remember, in Harlem, respect isn't given, it's earned.